Vivian Hart stared at the architectural blueprints spread across her kitchen table, each one a ghost of her former life. 6 months ago, she had been a rising star in the design world, fielding calls from developers who wanted her vision for their projects. Now, her phone stayed silent, collecting dust beside unpaid bills and a nearly empty bank account. She traced her finger over the corner of one drawing, the waterfront complex she had designed for what was supposed to be her breakout project. Except her name wasn't on the final plans. Richard Blackwell's name was. Her former business partner, the man she had trusted with access to her files, her concepts, her years of work. He had copied everything, sold her designs to rival construction firms, and when she confronted him, he had smiled and told her to prove it. Without a lawyer she couldn't afford, without connections in an industry that rewarded money over talent, Vivian had watched Richard climb higher while her reputation crumbled. Clients stopped returning calls. Interviews went cold. Whispers spread that she was difficult to work with, unreliable, a liability. Tonight, Richard Blackwell would stand on a stage at the Winter Charity Gala and accept an award as Entrepreneur of the Year. He would shake hands with the mayor, pose for photographs, and bask in applause that should have been hers. Vivian pushed back from the table and walked to her closet. Hanging in the back, still wrapped in protective plastic, was a dress she had bought that morning with the last $300 in her savings account. It was crimson silk, backless, with a neckline that plunged low enough to make a statement, and a slit that ran dangerously high up her thigh. She wasn't going to the gala to beg. She wasn't going to plead her case or appeal to Richard's non-existent conscience. She was going to walk into that room, look him in the eye, and remind him exactly what he had stolen. If she was going down, she would do it on her terms, dressed like fire itself. An hour later, Vivian stood in front of her bathroom mirror, applying dark red lipstick with a steady hand. Her reflection looked fierce, angular, beautiful in a way that felt like armor. She pinned her chestnut hair up in a twist, leaving a few strands loose to frame her face. Her green eyes blazed with determination. The Plaza Hotel rose like a monument to excess, all marble columns and golden chandeliers. Vivian handed her coat to the attendant and stepped into the grand ballroom. The effect was immediate. Conversations stuttered and died. Heads turned in perfect synchronization, a wave of attention that rippled outward from the entrance. In a sea of black tuxedos and pastel gowns, Vivian was a slash of vivid crimson. She walked with deliberate grace, her heels clicking against polished marble, her chin held high. She could feel eyes tracking her movement, hear the whispered speculation. At the center of the room, near a table laden with champagne flutes and crystal, Richard Blackwell stood laughing at some joke. He wore a tailored navy suit and an expression of smug satisfaction. When his gaze landed on Vivian, the laughter died in his throat. His face went pale, then flushed an ugly shade of red. Vivian grabbed a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and took a slow sip, never breaking eye contact with Richard. She didn't approach him. She didn't need to. Her presence alone was the accusation. Richard excused himself from his group and crossed the room toward her, his jaw tight with barely controlled anger. He stopped a few feet away, close enough that his voice wouldn't carry to the surrounding guests. "What the hell do you think you're doing here?" he hissed. "Attending a charity event," Vivian replied calmly. "It's open to the public. I bought a ticket. You weren't invited. Neither were half the people in this room. They just have better credit cards than I do." She tilted her head. "Congratulations on your award, Richard. Entrepreneur of the Year. That must feel incredible, taking credit for someone else's work." His hand shot out and gripped her upper arm, fingers digging into bare skin. "You need to leave. Now, before you embarrass yourself further. Let go of me," Vivian said, her voice steady, despite the spike of adrenaline in her veins. "You're making a scene," Richard snapped, pulling her toward the side exit. "Everyone is staring. You look desperate, Vivian. Pathetic." She tried to wrench her arm free, but his grip tightened. A few nearby guests glanced over with uncomfortable expressions, but no one intervened. That was the rule of wealth. Never get involved in someone else's drama. Vivian dug her heels into the floor, refusing to be dragged out like a misbehaving child. I said let go. You don't belong here, Richard growled, his breath hot against her ear. You never did. You're a nobody who got lucky with a few decent sketches. I made you relevant, and you should be grateful I even gave you the opportunity to work with me. Before Vivian could respond, the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Richard's grip on her arm loosened slightly, his eyes widening as he looked past her shoulder. A shadow fell across them both. Vivian turned her head and found herself face to face with a wall of a man. He was at least 6'4", broad-shouldered, dressed in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo that somehow made him look more dangerous, not less. His hair was dark, almost black, styled with careless precision. His eyes were a deep brown, nearly amber in the chandelier light, and they were locked on Richard with an intensity that could melt steel. The man didn't speak. He didn't need to. His presence alone commanded silence. Richard released Vivian's arm as if burned, stumbling back a step. Mr. Salvatore, he stammered. I didn't see you there. This is just a misunderstanding. She's an old employee who got a little too emotional. I was just escorting her out. The man, Salvatore, ignored Richard entirely. His gaze shifted to Vivian, sweeping over her from head to toe. It wasn't the leering stare she had endured from other men tonight. It was assessing, calculating, and strangely possessive. Then, without a word, he reached up and shrugged off his coat. It was expensive, Armani or something equally obscene, lined with silk that whispered as it moved. In one fluid motion, he swung it around and threw it over Vivian, the heavy fabric engulfing her shoulders, her chest, covering the crimson dress completely. Vivian gasped, momentarily blinded by the darkness of the coat. It smelled like cedar and rain and something indefinably masculine. Before she could protest, Salvatore pulled the lapels of the coat closed, wrapping her tightly, and drew her against his chest. His arm was steel around her waist, holding her in place. He turned toward Richard, and when he spoke, his voice was low and rough, a sound that vibrated through Vivian's entire body. No one sees this but me. It wasn't a suggestion. It wasn't a request. It was a decree, delivered with the kind of authority that expected no argument. Richard's face drained of all color. He looked like a man who had just realized he was standing on the edge of a cliff. Of course, Mr. Salvatore. I apologize. I didn't realize she was with you. Salvatore didn't respond. He simply turned, his arm still locked around Vivian, and began walking toward the exit. Vivian had no choice but to move with him, her heels barely touching the ground as he guided her through the ballroom. The crowd parted like water, guests stepping aside to clear a path. The entire room watched in stunned silence as Dominic Salvatore escorted a woman wrapped in his coat out of the gala. Vivian caught a glimpse of Richard standing frozen, his face a mask of terror and rage. Outside, the cold night air hit like a slap. Salvatore released her only when they reached the parking garage, a dim concrete structure far from the valet stand. He stepped back, giving her space for the first time since he had intervened. Vivian pulled the coat tighter around herself, suddenly aware of how exposed she felt without it. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice sharper than intended. "And what the hell was that?" "Dominic Salvatore," he said simply, leaning against a black luxury sedan. His eyes studied her face with unnerving focus. "And that was me saving you from making a mistake. I didn't ask for your help." "No," Dominic agreed. "But you needed it." Vivian bristled. "I had the situation under control. Richard Blackwell was about to throw you out of that gala and call security to make sure you never got within 100 feet of him again. You would have accomplished nothing except humiliating yourself." Dominic crossed his arms. "I gave you something better. I made him afraid." "Why would you do that?" Vivian asked, suspicion lacing every word. "You don't know me. You don't know Richard. Why would you care?" Dominic tilted his head, a ghost of a smile playing at the corner of his mouth. "I know Richard Blackwell owes me $300,000. I know he used stolen architectural designs as collateral for loans he had no intention of repaying. And I know those designs belong to you." Vivian's breath caught. "How do you know that?" "I make it my business to know everything about the people who owe me money." Dominic pushed off the car and took a step closer. "Richard has been dodging my calls for 2 months. He thinks he can hide behind lawyers and shell companies. He's wrong. What do you want from me? Vivian asked, her heart pounding. Dominic looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. I can destroy Richard Blackwell. I can take everything he has, ruin his reputation, and make sure he never works in this city again. I have the evidence, the connections, and the resources to bury him so deep he'll never crawl out. And the price? Vivian asked quietly. You work for me, Dominic said. Exclusively. I have projects that need an architect with vision, someone who isn't afraid to push boundaries. You do the work. I handle Richard. Vivian stared at him, trying to read the man behind the cold exterior. You're offering me a job. I'm offering you revenge, Dominic corrected. The job is just the method of payment. She should walk away. Every instinct screamed that Dominic Salvatore was dangerous, that accepting his offer would drag her into a world she didn't understand. But standing there in the cold parking garage, wrapped in his coat that still carried his warmth, Vivian realized she had nothing left to lose. When do I start? She asked. Dominic's smile was slow and dangerous. Tomorrow. I'll send a car for you at 9. He turned and opened the driver's side door of the sedan, pausing before he got in. Keep the coat, he said. You'll need it. Then he was gone, the engine purring to life as he drove into the night, leaving Vivian standing alone beneath flickering concrete lights, wearing a crimson dress and a stranger's coat, with the taste of champagne and possibilities on her tongue. 2 weeks had passed since the gala, and Vivian still wasn't entirely sure she had made the right decision. But when the sleek black car arrived at precisely 9 a.m, she got in anyway, clutching a portfolio of her best work and a thermos of coffee strong enough to strip paint. The driver said nothing during the 20-minute ride through downtown traffic. He wore a dark suit and an earpiece, and his eyes never stopped scanning the rearview mirror. Vivian tried to convince herself this was normal for wealthy businessmen, but the knot in her stomach suggested otherwise. The car pulled up to a glass tower that dominated the skyline, all sharp angles and reflective surfaces that caught the morning sun. The lobby was marble and steel, with a security desk manned by guards who looked more like military personnel than rent-a-cops. Ms. Hart, one of them said, without checking a list. Mr. Salvatore is expecting you. Top floor. The elevator ride felt eternal. Vivian watched the numbers climb, her reflection distorted in the polished metal doors. She had dressed professionally today. Charcoal blazer, cream blouse, black trousers. Her hair was pulled back in a neat bun. She looked like someone who belonged in a corporate tower, even if she felt like an imposter. The doors opened directly into a penthouse office that occupied the entire top floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, making Vivian feel like she was standing on top of the world. The furniture was minimalist and expensive, all clean lines and dark wood. Dominic Salvatore stood at the windows with his back to her, phone pressed to his ear. He wore charcoal slacks and a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing forearms corded with muscle. His voice was low, measured, and carried an edge of warning. Tell him he has until Friday to reconsider. After that, the offer expires and my patience with it. He ended the call without waiting for a response, and turned to face her. Vivian, you're punctual. I appreciate that. You're paying me to be here, Vivian replied, setting her portfolio on the desk. Punctuality seems like the minimum requirement. A flicker of amusement crossed his features. Most people are intimidated by this office. You look annoyed. I'm cautious, Vivian corrected. You made me an offer that sounds too good to be true, which usually means it is. So before we go any further, I want details. What exactly does working for you entail? And what are you really getting out of this arrangement? Dominic gestured to a leather chair. Sit. This will take a few minutes. Vivian sat, folding her hands in her lap, while Dominic rounded the desk. He opened a drawer and pulled out a thick manila folder, sliding it across the polished surface toward her. Richard Blackwell took out loans from 3 different sources over the past year, Dominic began. 2 were legitimate banks. The 3rd was me. He needed capital to bid on a waterfront development project. The one you designed, actually, though he neglected to mention the plans weren't his. Vivian opened the folder. Inside were bank statements, loan documents, and copies of her own blueprints with Richard's signature in the corner where hers should have been. He owes you $300,000, Vivian said quietly, scanning the numbers. Plus interest. He's made exactly 2 payments in 8 months, both of them minimum amounts calculated to stall rather than satisfy the debt. Dominic leaned back in his chair. Richard thought he could use those stolen designs to leverage more money from other investors, pay me off, and walk away clean. Instead, the project fell through when the lead contractor discovered the plans were plagiarized. Richard is now drowning in debt with no way to pay it back. So you want to collect? Vivian said. And you need me to do what exactly? Testify that he stole my work? I need you to design new projects that will actually succeed, Dominic replied. I acquire properties, hotels, commercial buildings, residential developments. I need someone who can transform them into something profitable. Your reputation was destroyed by Richard, but your talent wasn't. I've seen your portfolio. You're better than anyone I could hire through conventional channels. Vivian studied him carefully. And in exchange, you destroy Richard. I restore your reputation and destroy Richard, Dominic corrected. The evidence in that folder goes to the FBI. Richard goes to prison for fraud and money laundering. Your name gets cleared in every publication that matters. You get a second chance. It was everything Vivian had wanted for 6 months. Justice, vindication, a future. But nothing in life came without strings, especially not from men like Dominic Salvatore. What's the catch? She asked. Exclusivity, Dominic said. You work for me and only me for the next 2 years. You live in an apartment I provide, in a building with security I trust. You accept protection when I deem it necessary, and you don't ask questions about the parts of my business that don't concern you. Protection, Vivian repeated. From what? From anyone who might use you to get to me, Dominic said simply. I have competitors who would be very interested in disrupting my projects. If they know you're valuable to me, you become a target. I don't take unnecessary risks with my assets. The word assets rankled, but Vivian forced herself to stay calm. I'm not a possession. No, Dominic agreed. But you are someone I'm investing significant resources in protecting. That makes you valuable, whether you like the terminology or not. Vivian closed the folder and pushed it back across the desk. I want full creative control over my designs. No interference, no micromanaging. If you hire me for my talent, you trust my judgment. Agreed. I want my own office, not some cubicle where your people can watch me work. You'll have the corner office on the 15th floor. Windows, private bathroom, door that locks. And I want it in writing that if I fulfill this 2-year contract, you provide references that will let me work anywhere I want after it's over. No strings, no obligations. Dominic smiled, and it was a genuine expression that transformed his entire face. You negotiate like someone who's been burned before. I have been, Vivian said flatly. By Richard. I won't make that mistake twice. Then we understand each other. Dominic stood and extended his hand. Do we have a deal, Ms. Hart? Vivian looked at his hand for a long moment, then shook it. His grip was firm and warm, and he held on just a fraction longer than necessary before releasing her. Your first project starts today, Dominic said, moving to a cabinet against the wall. He pulled out another folder, this one filled with photographs and property documents. I recently acquired the Whitmore Hotel in the historic district. It's been vacant for 3 years, structurally sound but cosmetically dated. I want it transformed into a luxury boutique hotel. Timeline is 6 months. Budget is flexible if the results justify it. Vivian flipped through the photos. The Whitmore was a beautiful building, Art Deco architecture with bones that begged to be restored properly. Her mind immediately began cataloging possibilities. I'll need to visit the site, she said. Take measurements. Assess the infrastructure. I'll arrange it for tomorrow morning. Dominic checked his watch. There's someone I want you to meet first. Before Vivian could ask who, the office door burst open without warning. A young woman breezed in, carrying 2 coffee cups and wearing scrubs under a leather jacket. She had the same dark hair as Dominic, though hers fell in loose waves past her shoulders, and her eyes were a lighter shade of brown, almost amber in the sunlight streaming through the windows. Dom, I need your signature on the tuition reimbursement form before Friday or the bursar's office is going to have a meltdown, and I really don't have time to deal with bureaucratic nonsense when I have 3 exams next week. She stopped short when she noticed Vivian. Oh, sorry. I didn't realize you had a meeting, Sophia, Dominic said, his entire demeanor shifting. The cold businessman vanished, replaced by something softer. I told you to call before coming up. I texted, Sophia countered, handing him one of the coffee cups. Not my fault you don't check your phone. She turned to Vivian and offered a bright smile. Hi. I'm Sophia Salvatore, Dominic's sister and perpetual thorn in his overprotective side. You must be the famous architect he's been obsessing over for the past 2 weeks. I haven't been obsessing, Dominic said dryly. You've mentioned her in literally every conversation we've had, Sophia replied, then extended her hand to Vivian. Ignore him. He pretends to be intimidating, but he's actually a big softie. Vivian shook her hand, surprised by the warmth in Sophia's grip. Vivian Hart. And I'm not sure softie is the word I'd use. Give it time, Sophia said with a conspiratorial wink. So you're the one who's going to save the Whitmore? I loved that hotel when I was a kid. My mom used to take me there for tea in the lobby. Sophia's finishing her medical degree, Dominic interjected, at the university across town, which is where she should be right now instead of bothering me about forms I already signed and sent yesterday. Sophia rolled her eyes. You're such a liar. I checked the portal this morning and nothing's been processed. She pulled out her phone. See? Status. Pending. Dominic took the phone, scanned the screen, and muttered something under his breath in Italian that made Sophia laugh. Fine. I'll call them this afternoon. Thank you. Sophia turned back to Vivian. Are you settling in okay? Dominic mentioned he was setting you up in one of his buildings. Fair warning, his idea of security is borderline paranoid. You'll have about 17 cameras in the hallway, and a doorman who looks like he eats raw meat for breakfast. Sophia, Dominic said, a note of warning in his voice. What? I'm just preparing her. Sophia checked her watch and grimaced. I have to run. Anatomy lab in 20 minutes, and Professor Caruso loses his mind if anyone's late. Vivian, it was nice meeting you. We should get coffee sometime when my brother isn't hovering like a gargoyle. I'd like that, Vivian said, surprised to find she meant it. Sophia grabbed her bag and headed for the door, but Dominic's voice stopped her. Soph, you're not taking the subway. It's broad daylight, Dom. I'll be fine. Marcus is downstairs. He'll drive you. Sophia sighed dramatically but didn't argue. Fine. But tell him to use the normal car, not the tank with bulletproof windows. It's embarrassing pulling up to campus in that thing. She left in a whirlwind of energy, the door clicking shut behind her. The office felt quieter in her absence. She's spirited, Vivian said carefully. She's reckless, Dominic replied. But there was affection beneath the irritation. He moved back to the windows, staring out at the city. Sophia's the reason I do half of what I do. She was 15 when our father died. Someone had to make sure she had a future. Vivian heard the weight in those words, the unspoken sacrifices. How old were you? 25. Dominic's jaw tightened. Old enough to take over the family business. Young enough to make mistakes I'm still paying for. Before Vivian could respond, Dominic's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and his expression darkened. Excuse me a moment. He stepped into an adjoining room, but his voice carried through the partially open door. Vivian caught fragments of the conversation. How many men? And they were taking photos. A pause. Vincent Russo. Of course it's Vincent. Another pause. Longer this time. Double the security at the site. I want someone there 24/7. And find out who gave him the location. When Dominic returned, the softness that had appeared while talking about Sophia was gone. He looked like a man preparing for war. Is there a problem? Vivian asked. Nothing that concerns you, Dominic replied, but his tone was clipped. I'm assigning 2 men to your detail. They'll be discreet, but they'll be with you whenever you leave the apartment. Bodyguards? I thought you said I'd be safe. You are safe, Dominic said, as long as I control the variables. Consider it a precaution. Vivian stood, frustration bubbling up. You said you don't take unnecessary risks. This sounds pretty necessary, which means you're not telling me something. Dominic studied her for a long moment, and Vivian could see him weighing how much truth to offer. Finally, he sighed. I have a competitor, Vincent Russo. He's been pushing into territories I've held for years, trying to force me out through intimidation and disruption. If he knows you're working for me, on a project I care about, he'll see you as leverage. I won't give him that opportunity. So I'm bait, Vivian said flatly. You're protected, Dominic corrected. There's a difference. Vivian grabbed her portfolio and headed for the door. I'll visit the Whitmore site tomorrow. Alone. Your guards can watch from a distance if it makes you feel better. But I'm not starting this job looking over my shoulder every 5 seconds. Vivian. She turned back. Dominic stood backlit by the windows, a silhouette of controlled power. This isn't a negotiation, he said quietly. You agreed to protection when necessary. I'm telling you it's necessary. For a moment they stood in tense silence, two wills locked in conflict. Then Vivian nodded once, sharp and reluctant. Fine, but they stay outside while I work. Agreed. Vivian left the office, rode the elevator down in strained silence, and stepped out into the midday sun. A black SUV idled at the curb. 2 men in dark suits stood beside it, watching her with the patient intensity of predators. She had wanted revenge, wanted justice, wanted her life back. She was getting all of that, but the price was higher than she'd anticipated. Vivian climbed into the SUV and watched the city roll past, wondering if she'd just made a deal with the devil, and if the devil's sister might be the only ally she'd find in whatever came next. 1 month into working for Dominic Salvatore, Vivian had fallen into a rhythm that felt almost normal. She spent her mornings at the Whitmore Hotel, watching contractors strip away decades of neglect to reveal the Art Deco masterpiece hidden beneath. Her afternoons were devoted to renderings and material selections, transforming her vision into something tangible. The evenings were hers, mostly, except for the twice-weekly dinners Dominic insisted on to review progress. The bodyguards had become background noise. Marcus and Leo, both former military, maintained a professional distance that allowed Vivian to pretend they weren't there. They drove her to sites, waited in vehicles or lobbies, and never asked questions about her work. It was as close to freedom as she was likely to get under the circumstances. Tonight, Vivian had stayed late at Dominic's office to finalize vendor contracts. The building was quiet after hours, most of the staff gone home. She worked in the conference room adjacent to Dominic's private office, spreadsheets and invoices scattered across the polished table. She needed the original loan documents to verify a payment schedule. Dominic had mentioned keeping financial files in his office desk. He was downstairs in a meeting with his lawyers, had been for the past 2 hours. Vivian hesitated only briefly before walking into his office. The desk was massive, walnut with brass hardware. She opened the top drawer, finding it impeccably organized. Pens, business cards, a leather-bound planner. The second drawer held hanging files arranged alphabetically. She found Whitmore Project easily and pulled it out. Beneath it was another file, thicker, labeled simply Blackwell. Vivian's pulse quickened. She shouldn't look. This violated every professional boundary, crossed a line she had promised herself she wouldn't cross. But her hand moved before her conscience could stop it, pulling the file free and opening it on the desk. The first few pages were loan documents she had already seen. But beneath those were bank statements showing wire transfers, hundreds of thousands of dollars moving between accounts. Richard's name appeared repeatedly, but so did another name, Vincent Russo. Vivian's hands trembled as she flipped through page after page of evidence. Shell companies, false invoices, construction projects that existed only on paper. Richard hadn't just stolen her designs. He had been laundering money through fake development deals, using her blueprints to make the schemes look legitimate, and Dominic had known. For months, by the look of the dates on these documents. He had been investigating Richard long before the gala, long before he had made his offer to Vivian. Find what you were looking for. Vivian spun around. Dominic stood in the doorway, jacket discarded, sleeves rolled up, expression unreadable. I was looking for the Whitmore contracts, Vivian said, hating how defensive she sounded. I found this instead. Dominic walked into the office and closed the door behind him. He didn't look angry, Just tired. And now you have questions. You've been investigating Richard for 6 months, Vivian said, holding up one of the bank statements. This wire transfer is dated last April. You knew he was laundering money. You knew he was working with Vincent Russo. Why didn't you tell me? Because it wasn't relevant to your work, Dominic replied, moving to the bar cart against the wall. He poured 2 glasses of scotch, neat, and held one out to her. Vivian didn't take it. Not relevant. Richard used my designs to commit fraud. He made me complicit in money laundering without my knowledge. That seems pretty damn relevant. You were never complicit, Dominic said calmly. Your name isn't on any of these documents. Richard forged signatures, created false partnerships, and buried your involvement so deep that even if this all came to light, you'd be classified as a victim, not an accomplice. How generous of him, Vivian said bitterly. She sank into the chair behind Dominic's desk, the file still open in front of her. How much money are we talking about? $500,000, give or take. Dominic set her untouched scotch on the desk and took a sip of his own. Vincent Russo needed to clean cash from less legitimate ventures. Richard needed capital to maintain his lifestyle. They found each other through mutual desperation. Richard used your designs to pitch fake development projects to investors. The investors would put money in. Richard would siphon most of it to Russo's shell companies, and everyone walked away happy except the people who expected actual buildings. Vivian stared at the documents, nausea rising in her throat. I trusted him. For 2 years I worked beside him. I thought we were partners. You were the golden goose, Dominic said quietly. Richard has no talent of his own. He needed you to provide legitimacy while he ran the con. When you started asking questions about where the money was going, he cut you loose and destroyed your reputation to ensure you couldn't expose him. And you? Vivian looked up at him. What were you getting out of this? Why spend 6 months investigating Richard when you could have just collected the debt through other means? Dominic's jaw tightened. Because Vincent Russo is a problem I've been trying to solve for a long time. He's been pushing into my territories, undercutting my businesses, bribing city officials who were supposed to stay bought. Richard was a thread I could pull to unravel the whole operation. I needed time to build a case that would bring them both down. So I was bait, Vivian said. From the very beginning. You didn't offer me a job because you needed an architect. You offered me a job because it would draw Richard out, make him desperate. No, Dominic said sharply. He set down his glass and moved around the desk, looming over her. I offered you a job because you're the best architect I've ever seen, and Richard destroyed you out of greed and cowardice. The fact that helping you also helped me dismantle Russo's operation was convenient, but it wasn't the primary motivation. I don't believe you. I don't care if you believe me, Dominic replied. But you should care about this. He reached past her and pulled another document from the file, this one stamped with an FBI seal. It was an indictment. United States v. Richard Blackwell. Charges included wire fraud, money laundering, racketeering, and conspiracy. This was filed 4 hours ago, Dominic said. Richard was arrested at his office this afternoon. He's being held without bail. The evidence against him is irrefutable because I spent 6 months making sure of it. He'll spend the next 15 to 20 years in federal prison. And when he gets out, he'll have nothing. No reputation, no money, no future. Vivian stared at the indictment, her hands shaking. This was what she had wanted. Justice, revenge, vindication. So why did she feel so hollowed out? The story breaks tomorrow morning. Dominic continued. Every major publication in the city will run it. Your name will be mentioned as one of Richard's victims. I've already arranged interviews with 3 journalists who will tell your side of the story. By the end of the week, every firm that blacklisted you will be calling with apologies and job offers. You planned all of this, Vivian whispered. I execute plans, Dominic corrected. It's what I do. Vivian stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. She walked to the windows, pressing her forehead against the cool glass. The city sprawled below, millions of lights in the darkness. I should be grateful, she said. You gave me everything I wanted. But I can't shake the feeling that I'm just another piece on your chessboard, being moved around to serve a strategy I don't fully understand. Dominic appeared beside her, his reflection ghostly in the glass. You're not a piece, Vivian. You're a person who deserved better than what Richard gave you. I had the means to fix it, so I did. If that served my interests as well, then we both won. I don't see the problem." Vivian turned to face him. They were standing close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, smell the faint scent of his cologne. "The problem is that I don't know who you really are. I don't know if you're the man who protects his sister and offers second chances, or if you're the man who manipulates people into position and calls it helping." "I'm both," Dominic said simply. "I've never pretended otherwise." Before Vivian could respond, Dominic's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and his expression shifted, hardening into something cold and dangerous. "I need to make a call," he said. "Wait here." He stepped back into the conference room, but didn't close the door completely. Vivian could hear his voice, clipped and controlled. "When did the story break?" "I specifically said tomorrow morning." A pause. "Unacceptable. Someone leaked it early." "Find out who." Another pause. Longer. "I see. And Richard's lawyer is already claiming prosecutorial misconduct." "Of course he is." Vivian drifted closer to the door, listening. "I don't care what accommodations he needs," Dominic said coldly. "Richard made his choices. He can live with the consequences. What I care about is whether this affects the timeline for the Russo investigation." She heard him exhale sharply, frustration evident even in that small sound. "Fine. Keep me updated. And double the security at the Whitmore site. If the story is out early, Russo will know I'm the source. He'll retaliate." When Dominic returned to the office, Vivian was standing exactly where he had left her. "Richard's been arrested," she said. "The news already leaked." "It was supposed to wait until morning," Dominic replied. "Someone at the FBI has a big mouth and a relationship with a reporter who couldn't wait for an exclusive. It doesn't change anything except the timing." "Will they come after me?" Vivian asked. "Richard's lawyers, I mean. Will they try to implicate me to make their case look better?" "They'll try," Dominic said. "They won't succeed. I have affidavits from former employees confirming you had no knowledge of the financial arrangements. I have emails proving Richard deliberately excluded you from meetings with investors. I have everything we need to keep you clear." Vivian nodded slowly, processing. "You really did think of everything." "I had to." Dominic moved to the bar cart and refilled his glass. "Vincent Russo doesn't forgive, and he doesn't forget. Taking down Richard was a declaration of war. I needed to make sure every angle was covered before I pulled the trigger." "And now?" Vivian asked. "What happens now?" "Now we celebrate," Dominic said. "The Whitmore project is ahead of schedule. Richard is in prison. You're about to get your reputation back. I'd call that a win." He grabbed his jacket from the back of his chair and gestured toward the elevator. "Come on. I want to show you something." 20 minutes later, they stood on the rooftop of the Whitmore Hotel. The renovation was far from complete, but the bones of the building sang with potential. Scaffolding clung to the sides, and construction equipment sat dormant in the corners, but the view of the city was breathtaking. Dominic had arranged for champagne and glasses, which sat on a makeshift table fashioned from plywood and sawhorses. It was absurd and perfect. "This is ridiculous," Vivian said, accepting the glass he poured for her. "We're standing on a construction site drinking champagne." "We're standing on your vision," Dominic corrected. "The Whitmore is going to be the crown jewel of this district because of you. That deserves acknowledgement." They clinked glasses, and Vivian took a sip. The champagne was expensive, bubbles dancing on her tongue. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to relax slightly. "You were right," she admitted. "About Richard. I wanted to confront him myself, make him face what he did. But this is better. He's losing everything while I'm standing on a rooftop drinking champagne. That's a better revenge than anything I could have said to him." "Revenge is best served with champagne and a good view," Dominic said, the ghost of a smile playing at his lips. The rooftop access door opened with a bang, and Sophia emerged, breathless and grinning. "I heard the news. Richard Blackwell finally got what he deserved. Vivian, you must be thrilled." "I'm processing," Vivian said, surprised by how much she meant it. "It doesn't feel real yet." "Give it time," Sophia said, accepting the glass Dominic poured for her. When the articles come out tomorrow and everyone realizes you were the talent behind those designs, you're going to be fielding calls for months. I'm proud of you. Both of you, actually. Dom, you didn't even threaten to break anyone's legs this time. The month is young, Dominic replied dryly. Sophia laughed and raised her glass. To Vivian Hart, architect extraordinaire and survivor of corporate espionage. May your buildings stand tall and your enemies crumble. They drank to that, and for a few minutes, everything felt easy. Sophia chattered about her exams and a professor who had accidentally set his notes on fire during a lecture. Vivian found herself laughing, the tension of the past month bleeding away. Then Sophia's phone buzzed. She checked it and grimaced. I have to run. Study group in 30 minutes, and if I'm late, Jeremy will have a breakdown. He's brilliant, but deeply neurotic. She hugged Vivian quickly, whispered something to Dominic that made him frown, and disappeared back through the rooftop door. The evening had cooled, a breeze cutting across the rooftop. Vivian shivered slightly, and without a word, Dominic shrugged off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. The gesture was gentle, careful, so different from the possessive way he had thrown his coat over her at the gala. Thank you, Vivian said softly. You're welcome. They stood in comfortable silence, looking out at the city. Vivian pulled the jacket tighter, breathing in the scent of cedar and something uniquely Dominic. Then his phone rang, shattering the moment. Dominic answered with a curt, "What?" Vivian watched his expression darken, his jaw clenching as he listened to whoever was on the other end. How did he get this number? Dominic demanded. No, don't answer that. What did he say exactly? A long pause. Dominic's free hand curled into a fist. Tell him I'm not interested in negotiations. The Whitmore project moves forward as planned. If he has a problem with that, he can take it up with my lawyers. He ended the call and stood motionless, staring at his phone. What's wrong? Vivian asked, though she already knew the answer would be bad. Vincent Russo, Dominic said quietly. He just made a formal demand that I hand over the Whitmore project and 2 other properties. Or there will be consequences. He knows I was behind Richard's arrest. He's retaliating. Vivian's blood ran cold. What kind of consequences? Dominic looked at her, and for the first time since she had met him, she saw something close to worry in his eyes. The kind I can't ignore. Russo doesn't make empty threats. If he says there will be consequences, he means it. Vivian realized with sickening clarity that her connection to Dominic had painted a target on her back. She wasn't just an employee anymore. She was leverage, a vulnerability Russo could exploit. I'm in danger, she said. It wasn't a question. You're protected, Dominic replied, but the words sounded hollow even to him. I won't let anything happen to you. Vivian nodded, but the champagne suddenly tasted like ash in her mouth. She had wanted justice, and she had gotten it. But the cost was steeper than she had imagined, and the bill was coming due. 6 weeks had passed since Richard's arrest made headlines, and Vivian's life had transformed in ways she was still trying to process. Interview requests flooded her email. Architectural firms she had once begged for entry-level positions were now calling with partnership offers. Her name appeared in trade publications with words like visionary and rising star attached to it. The Whitmore Hotel was 3 months from completion, every detail coming together exactly as she had envisioned. She should have felt victorious. Instead, she felt trapped in an elegant cage. The bars made of security protocols and Dominic's increasingly rigid control over her movements. Marcus and Leo had been joined by 2 additional bodyguards. Her apartment building now had armed security at every entrance. Dominic insisted on knowing her schedule down to the minute, and any deviation required approval that came with a lecture about unnecessary risks. Vivian understood the reasoning. Vincent Russo was still out there, still angry, still dangerous. But understanding didn't make the suffocation any easier to bear. She was reviewing tile samples in her office when Dominic appeared in the doorway without knocking. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her first car. His expression carved from stone. We need to talk, he said. Vivian set down the samples. That sounds ominous. Richard's lawyer filed a motion this morning. They're claiming you were complicit in the money laundering scheme, that you knowingly provided designs for fake projects and should be charged as an accomplice. The room tilted slightly. That's insane. I had no idea what Richard was doing. I know that. The FBI knows that. But Richard's defense team is desperate, and throwing you under the bus is their only play. Dominic moved into the office and closed the door behind him. I've already contacted my legal team. They're preparing a comprehensive response with witness statements, email records, everything we need to prove you were deliberately kept in the dark. How much is this going to cost? Vivian asked quietly. It doesn't matter. It matters to me. Vivian stood, frustration bubbling over. I'm already in debt to you for the apartment, the security, this job. Now I need lawyers because the man you took down is using me as a scapegoat. When does this end, Dominic? When do I get to just live my life without looking over my shoulder? When Vincent Russo is no longer a threat, Dominic replied evenly. Which could be months, maybe longer. So I'm supposed to what? Hide forever? Let you control every aspect of my existence because someone out there might want to hurt me? I'm keeping you alive, Dominic said, his voice dropping to something dangerous. Russo doesn't make idle threats. He's already planted a bomb in one location. Who's to say he won't try again? Vivian froze. What bomb? Dominic's jaw tightened. It doesn't matter. It was handled. Tell me. He studied her for a long moment, then sighed. 2 weeks ago, his people attempted to plant explosives at one of my warehouses. We caught them before they could finish. They're in custody, but they won't talk. Russo is escalating, and you're a visible connection to me. That makes you vulnerable. Vivian sank back into her chair, the weight of the situation pressing down on her. I didn't sign up for this. I signed up to design buildings and get my reputation back, not to become collateral damage in a mob war. I know. Dominic moved around the desk, crouching beside her chair so they were at eye level. And if I could change that, I would. But we're past the point of simple solutions. Richard is in prison because of evidence I provided. Russo knows it. He's going to keep pushing until I give him what he wants or eliminate the threat permanently. What does he want? 3 properties. The Whitmore, a commercial development in the financial district, and a residential complex near the waterfront. Combined, they're worth about $40 million. Vivian's eyes widened. Are you going to give them to him? No. The word was flat, final. I don't negotiate with terrorists, and I don't surrender territory I've held for years because someone threatens me. It sets a precedent I can't afford. So we wait, Vivian said bitterly. We hide behind security and hope Russo gets bored or arrested before he actually manages to kill someone. We prepare, Dominic corrected. And we trust that I know what I'm doing. Vivian wanted to argue, but she was exhausted. She nodded slowly, and Dominic stood, his hand briefly touching her shoulder in something that might have been reassurance. I'm having dinner at my house tonight, he said. Private, just the 2 of us. We need to discuss long-term security arrangements, and I'd rather do it somewhere we won't be overheard. Is that a request or an order? Vivian asked. It's an invitation, Dominic replied. But I'm hoping you'll accept. She should refuse. She should maintain professional distance, keep the boundaries clear. But sitting in her office, surrounded by tile samples and floor plans, Vivian realized she was tired of fighting. Tired of being angry at Dominic for protecting her when the alternative was being unprotected. What time? She asked. 7. Marcus will drive you. After Dominic left, Vivian tried to focus on work, but couldn't shake the unease settling in her chest. She called Sophia during her lunch break, needing to hear a friendly voice. Vivian, I was just thinking about you, Sophia said, sounding slightly out of breath. I'm between classes, but I have 10 minutes. What's up? Your brother is driving me insane, Vivian said. He's added more security. He's micromanaging my schedule, and now Richard's lawyer is trying to implicate me in money laundering charges. I feel like I'm drowning. Sophia made a sympathetic noise. Dom goes into overprotective mode when he's worried. He's been like this since we were kids. When our dad died, he wouldn't let me leave the house without an armed escort for 6 months. It took therapy and several screaming matches before he eased up. How did you deal with it? I reminded him that suffocating me wasn't the same as protecting me, Sophia said, and eventually he listened. Dominic acts like a dictator, but he's actually pretty reasonable if you stand your ground. He respects strength. I don't feel very strong right now, Vivian admitted. Then fake it until you do, Sophia replied. Trust me, my brother responds better to direct confrontation than passive acceptance. If you let him steamroll you, he'll assume you're fine with it. They talked for a few more minutes before Sophia had to run to class. Vivian hung up feeling slightly better, though still uncertain about how to navigate the increasingly complicated situation she found herself in. At 6:30 that evening, Marcus drove Vivian through the city to an exclusive neighborhood where houses hid behind stone walls and iron gates. Dominic's residence was a modern structure of glass and steel, all clean lines and sharp angles. It looked more like an art installation than a home. Dominic answered the door himself, dressed casually in dark slacks and a white button-down with the sleeves rolled up. It was the most relaxed Vivian had ever seen him. You found it all right, he said, stepping aside to let her enter. Marcus could probably navigate here blindfolded at this point, Vivian replied. The interior was minimalist and expensive, furniture that looked uncomfortable but probably cost a fortune. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of a meticulously landscaped garden illuminated by subtle lighting. Dominic led her to a dining room where a table was set for two. Wine glasses, linen napkins, and dishes that looked like they belonged in a five-star restaurant. You cooked? Vivian asked, surprised. I had it catered, Dominic admitted, but I reheated it myself, so that counts for something. Despite herself, Vivian smiled. I'll give you partial credit. They sat, and Dominic poured wine, a red that tasted like velvet, and probably cost more than her monthly rent. The food was excellent, some kind of herb-crusted fish with roasted vegetables. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes before Dominic finally spoke. I owe you an explanation, he said, about why I'm being so rigid with security. It's not because I think you're incapable. It's because I've seen what Vincent Russo does to people he considers enemies. Tell me, Vivian said. Dominic set down his fork, his expression distant. When I was 25, my father was killed. It was made to look like a robbery, but everyone knew it was an execution. He had been trying to transition the family business into legitimate enterprises, which meant cutting ties with people like Russo, who preferred the old ways. They killed him as a message to anyone else who might have similar ideas. Vivian's breath caught. I'm sorry. I inherited everything, Dominic continued. The businesses, the properties, the enemies. Sophia was 15. She had just lost our father. And suddenly she had a brother who was barely an adult, trying to hold together an empire that was falling apart. I made a lot of mistakes in those first few years. I trusted the wrong people. I showed mercy when I should have shown strength. Sophia almost paid the price for my incompetence. What happened? Vivian asked softly. Someone tried to kidnap her, Dominic said, his voice flat, to use her as leverage against me. They grabbed her outside her school. She was in their car for about 20 minutes before my security team intercepted them. 20 minutes that taught me I couldn't afford to be weak, couldn't afford to take chances with the people I cared about. Vivian reached across the table and placed her hand over his. Sophia's fine now. You protected her. By accident, Dominic said. If my head of security hadn't been paranoid enough to have backup plans for the backup plans, she would have been gone. I learned from that. I learned that hope isn't a strategy, that caring about someone means being willing to do whatever it takes to keep them safe. He turned his hand over, lacing his fingers through hers. The touch was electric, intimate in a way that went beyond physical. You're not Sophia, Dominic said. You're an adult who can make your own decisions. But you're also someone who matters to me, which means I will be paranoid and overprotective, because the alternative is unthinkable. I matter to you, Vivian repeated, testing the words. Yes. There was no hesitation, no qualification, just simple truth. Vivian's heart hammered against her ribs. She had been telling herself for weeks that this was just business, that the attraction she felt was a side effect of proximity and adrenaline. But sitting across from Dominic in his fortress of a home, their hands linked on the table, she couldn't lie to herself anymore. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. I don't know how to be with someone whose life is so complicated, whose enemies plant bombs and file false charges. I'm an architect, Dominic. I design buildings. I don't navigate gang wars. You don't have to navigate anything, Dominic said. You just have to trust me to keep you safe while you live your life. Before Vivian could respond, her phone buzzed in her purse. She ignored it, but it buzzed again. And again. Persistent. Sorry, she muttered, pulling it out. The screen showed 6 missed calls from Marcus and a text that made her blood freeze. Do not start your car. Repeat. Do not start your car. Bomb squad en route. Vivian's hand started shaking. Dominic was around the table in an instant, taking the phone from her trembling fingers and reading the message. His face went absolutely still, a terrifying calm that was somehow worse than anger. He made a phone call, his voice clipped and controlled. Status report. Now. A pause. How close was it to detonation? I see. Casualties? Good. I want every camera within 3 blocks reviewed. I want to know who planted it, when they planted it, and where they are right now. And I want Vincent Russo's location confirmed within the hour. He ended the call and knelt in front of Vivian, his hands on her knees, grounding her. The device was found during a routine security sweep of your car. It hadn't been armed yet. You were never in danger because my people caught it first. He tried to blow me up, Vivian whispered. Russo tried to kill me. He tried to send a message, Dominic corrected. If he wanted you dead, the bomb would have been armed. This was meant to scare me, to show he can reach my people. Vivian felt something crack inside her, all the fear and frustration of the past weeks boiling over. I can't do this. I can't live like this, wondering if every time I get in a car or walk into a building, someone's planted something that will kill me. This isn't a life, Dominic. It's a nightmare. I know. Dominic pulled her out of the chair and into his arms, holding her tight against his chest. She could hear his heartbeat, steady and strong. I know, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry you got dragged into this. But you're here now, and I will not let anything happen to you. Do you understand? Russo will have to go through me to touch you, and I promise you, he won't. Vivian stood there, wrapped in Dominic's embrace, and realized she believed him. For all his flaws, for all the complications and danger that surrounded him, Dominic Salvatore kept his promises. He had promised to destroy Richard, and Richard was in prison. He had promised to protect Sophia, and Sophia was safe. He was promising to protect Vivian. And somehow, despite the bomb and the lawyers and the constant threat hovering over them, she trusted him. She pulled back just enough to look up at him. I'm tired of fighting this, she said. Whatever this is between us. I'm tired of pretending it doesn't exist. Dominic's eyes darkened, his hand coming up to cup her face. Say that again. I'm tired of fighting, Vivian repeated, her voice stronger. You terrify me, Dominic. The way you live, the way you operate. But you also make me feel safer than I've felt in years, and I don't know how to reconcile those two things. You don't have to reconcile them, Dominic said, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. You just have to decide if you want this. If you want me, with all the complications I come with. Vivian didn't answer with words. She rose on her toes and kissed him, pouring weeks of frustration and fear and desire into the contact. Dominic responded immediately, his arms tightening around her waist, lifting her slightly as he deepened the kiss. It was desperate and consuming, months of tension finally finding release. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Dominic rested his forehead against hers. You're staying here tonight, he said. It wasn't a question. I'm staying, Vivian agreed. He led her upstairs to a bedroom that was all dark wood and soft lighting, a king-sized bed that looked like it had never been used. Dominic was careful with her, almost reverent, as if she might break. Vivian let him take control, let herself sink into the feeling of being wanted and protected in equal measure. Later, lying in the darkness with Dominic's arm around her waist and his breath warm against her shoulder, Vivian felt something shift fundamentally. She had crossed a line tonight, stepped fully into Dominic's world with all its dangers and complications. Tomorrow there would be lawyers to deal with, threats to assess, security protocols to review. But tonight, wrapped in sheets that smelled like cedar and safety, Vivian allowed herself to simply exist in the moment, tethered to a man who had become far more than an employer, far more than a means to an end. 3 months had transformed everything. Vivian no longer lived in the apartment Dominic had provided. She lived in his home, in his bed, in his life. The Whitmore Hotel was 2 weeks from its grand opening, every detail perfected down to the custom light fixtures she had sourced from a craftsman in Brooklyn. Her name was on the plans, in the press releases, attached to something beautiful and permanent. She had stopped fighting the security protocols. Marcus and Leo were fixtures now, familiar faces who brought her coffee without being asked, and knew her schedule better than she did. Dominic still worried, still hovered, but he had learned to give her space when she needed it. They had found a rhythm, imperfect but functional. Sophia had become a constant in their lives, showing up for dinners at least twice a week, texting Vivian photos of particularly gruesome anatomy diagrams with commentary that made her laugh. The 3 of them felt like a family, something Vivian hadn't experienced since she was a child. Vincent Russo remained a shadow at the edges, an unsolved problem that Dominic refused to discuss in detail. There had been no more bombs, no more direct threats, just an uneasy stalemate that felt increasingly fragile. On a Tuesday morning in late spring, that fragile peace shattered completely. Vivian was in Dominic's office reviewing final budget reports for the Whitmore when his phone rang. He glanced at the screen and answered immediately, his tone clipped. "Talk to me." His face went absolutely still as he listened, every muscle in his body locking into place. "When? How long ago? I want every available unit mobilized. Now." He stood abruptly, the chair rolling backward and hitting the wall. Vivian had never seen him move with such barely contained violence. "What happened?" she asked, her stomach dropping. Dominic didn't answer. He was already making another call, his voice dropping into something cold and lethal. "I need street cameras pulled for the University District. 20-minute window starting at noon. I want facial recognition on every person within 3 blocks of the medical campus." Vivian stood, her heart pounding. "Dominic, what happened?" He finally looked at her, and what she saw in his eyes made her blood freeze. It wasn't anger. It was fear, raw and undisguised. "Sophia's been taken," he said. "She was leaving her anatomy lab. 3 men grabbed her and put her in a van. This was 25 minutes ago." The world tilted. Vivian grabbed the edge of the desk to steady herself. "Oh, God. Do you know where they took her?" "Not yet." Dominic's phone buzzed and he opened a message. His jaw clenched so tight Vivian heard his teeth grind. He turned the screen toward her. It was a photo of Sophia. She was in what looked like an old warehouse tied to a metal chair. Her face was streaked with tears, but she looked physically unharmed. Behind her, concrete walls and industrial piping were visible. In the corner of the image, barely visible, was a window with a distinctive pattern of metal security bars. A text accompanied the image. 3 properties. You have 12 hours, or she disappears permanently. VR. Vincent Russo, Vivian whispered. "He's making his move," Dominic said, his voice barely controlled fury. "He thinks taking Sophia will force me to surrender territory. He's wrong." Vivian stared at the photo, her architect's brain automatically cataloging details. The concrete walls had a specific texture, poured rather than block. The piping overhead was industrial grade, probably steam or water mains. The window bars had a diagonal cross pattern that was common in warehouses built in the 70s and 80s. "Wait," she said, taking the phone from Dominic's hand and zooming in on the background. "I know this kind of construction. The wall composition, the window design. This is an older industrial building, probably in the Port District or near the rail yards." Dominic looked at her sharply. "Can you narrow it down further?" Vivian studied the image, her mind racing. The ceiling height suggests it's not a standard warehouse. It's too tall, maybe 15 feet. And these pipes, they're oriented wrong for a typical shipping facility. This is probably a manufacturing plant or processing facility that's been abandoned. Dari. She pulled out her laptop and opened mapping software, switching to satellite view of the industrial districts. There are only 3 areas in the city with this kind of architecture from that era: Port District, West Rail Yard, and the old textile district near the river. Dominic was already on his phone, barking orders. I want teams dispatched to all 3 locations. Full tactical gear. If you find the building, do not engage until I arrive. Understood? He ended the call and turned to Vivian. I need you to stay here. Marcus will keep you secure. No, Vivian said firmly. I'm coming with you. Absolutely not. This is too dangerous. You need me, Vivian insisted. If your teams find multiple buildings that match the description, I can identify the right one faster than anyone else. I know architecture, Dominic. I can read structural details that your security team might miss. Vivian, these are armed men who kidnapped my sister. If shooting starts, I can't protect both you and Sophia. Then don't, Vivian said, meeting his eyes with unwavering determination. Protect Sophia. I'll stay in the vehicle, out of the line of fire. But you need every advantage you can get, and I'm offering you one. Don't let your fear for me cost Sophia time we don't have. Dominic stared at her. Conflict written clearly across his face. Then he made a decision. You stay in the armored vehicle at all times. You don't leave it for any reason unless I personally come get you. Understood? Understood. 20 minutes later, they were in a convoy of 3 black SUVs heading toward the Port District. Dominic's security team filled the other vehicles, armed and wearing tactical gear that made them look like a private army. Leo was driving, his face grim and focused. Dominic's phone rang constantly as his people fed him updates. 2 potential locations had been identified in the Port District, both abandoned processing plants with the right architectural profile. They pulled up to the first location, a hulking structure with broken windows and rust-stained walls. Vivian grabbed the photo of Sophia and compared it to the building in front of them. The window pattern's wrong, she said immediately, and the concrete is newer than what's in the photo. This isn't it. They moved to the second location, deeper into the industrial maze. This building looked older, more deteriorated. The security bars on the intact windows matched the diagonal cross pattern from the photo. This is it, Vivian said with certainty. Same construction era, same window design, same ceiling height from what I can see through the upper windows. Dominic kissed her hard and fast. Stay here, lock the doors. If anything goes wrong, Leo gets you out immediately. He was gone before she could respond, joining his team as they approached the building with military precision. Vivian watched through the tinted windows, her heart in her throat. They breached the main entrance, disappearing into the darkness of the building. For 10 agonizing minutes, Vivian heard nothing. Then gunfire erupted, sharp cracks that echoed off concrete walls. Leo tensed but didn't move, his hand on his weapon. They knew we were coming. Russo left guards. More gunfire, then silence. Vivian's fingernails dug into her palms. Finally, movement at the entrance. Dominic emerged carrying Sophia in his arms. She was conscious, crying, but alive. Behind him, his security team escorted 3 men with their hands zip-tied behind their backs. Leo unlocked the doors and Vivian jumped out, running to meet them. Sophia saw her and sobbed harder. I'm okay, Sophia gasped as Dominic set her down carefully. I'm okay. They didn't hurt me. Vivian hugged her tightly, while Dominic issued orders to his team. Get her to the house, full medical check, and someone call her doctor. What about Russo? One of the guards asked. Dominic's expression went cold. He's mine. I'll handle it personally. He turned to Vivian and Sophia. Both of you go with Marcus. Get Sophia home and safe. I'll be there in a few hours. Dominic, Vivian started, but he shook his head. This ends tonight, he said quietly. Russo crossed a line. There's no coming back from this. Vivian understood what he wasn't saying. Vincent Russo wouldn't be a problem after tonight because he wouldn't be breathing. She should have been horrified. Instead, she just felt tired. Come home safe, she said. I will. He kissed her once more, then disappeared back into the building with half his security team. Vivian and Sophia rode back to the house in tense silence. Sophia's hands were still shaking, her breathing uneven. When they arrived, Vivian helped her inside and sat with her on the couch while Marcus called a doctor. I was so scared, Sophia whispered. They grabbed me right outside the building. There were people everywhere. but it happened so fast no one even noticed until I was already in the van. You're safe now, Vivian said, holding her hand. Dominic won't let anything like this happen again. He's going to kill Russo, isn't he? Sophia asked quietly. Vivian didn't lie. Probably. Good, Sophia said, surprising her. I'm studying to save lives, to heal people. But some people can't be healed. Some people are just poison, and the only cure is removal. The doctor arrived and examined Sophia thoroughly, declaring her physically unharmed but prescribing sedatives to help her sleep. By midnight, Sophia was resting in one of the guest rooms with a security guard stationed outside her door. Vivian waited in the living room, unable to sleep. At 3 a.m, she heard the front door open. Dominic walked in looking exhausted and grim. There was blood on his shirt sleeve, but he moved without injury. Is it done? Vivian asked. It's done, Dominic confirmed. Russo won't be making any more demands. She didn't ask for details. She just crossed the room and wrapped her arms around him, holding tight. They stood like that for a long time, neither speaking, just existing in the relief of survival. 2 months later, life had settled into something resembling normal. Sophia had returned to classes with an expanded security detail she had grudgingly accepted. The Whitmore Hotel had opened to rave reviews, booked solid for the next 6 months, and Vivian had done something she never thought possible. She had opened her own architectural firm. Heart Design occupied a modest office space in a renovated brownstone. Just Vivian and 2 junior associates she had hired fresh out of graduate school. Dominic was a silent investor, providing capital, but no interference. The firm was hers, built on her talent and her vision. Tonight was a corporate networking event at the convention center, one of those obligatory functions where business cards were exchanged and deals were discussed over mediocre wine. Vivian had dressed carefully, choosing a gold silk dress with a fitted bodice and flowing skirt. It was elegant and professional, appropriate for the setting. Dominic accompanied her, devastatingly handsome in a navy suit. They worked the room together, Vivian introducing him to potential clients. Dominic charming investors with effortless charisma. Near the bar, a woman in an overly tight dress approached them, her eyes raking over Vivian with obvious disdain. Vivian Hart, right? I saw the article about your new firm. Impressive. Landing a commission for the Whitmore renovation. Though I have to wonder how much of that success came from talent versus other assets. Her gaze lingered on Vivian's neckline with a sneer. Before Vivian could respond, Dominic moved. In one smooth motion, he shrugged off his suit jacket and draped it over Vivian's shoulders, covering her dress. His arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her against his side. My apologies, Dominic said to the woman, his voice cordial, but his eyes dangerous. My fiancé doesn't need to prove anything to anyone, especially not to people whose own portfolios don't warrant discussion. He turned to Vivian, his expression softening. Ready to leave? I think we've been social long enough. Vivian smiled, sliding her arms into the jacket sleeves. It was too big, warm from his body heat, and smelled like him. I think you're right. They left the woman standing speechless by the bar. Outside, under the streetlights, Vivian laughed. Fiancé? She asked. Dominic pulled a small velvet box from his pocket and opened it. Inside was a ring, emerald-cut diamond set in platinum. I was planning a more romantic proposal, but that seemed like an appropriate moment. Marry me, Vivian. Build a life with me. Design our future together. Vivian looked at the ring, at the man holding it, at the life they had fought for and earned through fire and fear and determination. 6 months ago, she had walked into a gala wearing red and rage. Tonight, she stood wrapped in gold silk and Dominic's jacket, being offered everything she had never dared to dream of. Yes, she said. Absolutely yes. Dominic slid the ring onto her finger and kissed her, right there on the sidewalk with traffic passing and strangers watching. When they broke apart, Vivian felt something settle deep in her chest. Not the suffocating weight of captivity, but the grounding certainty of belonging. She had come to Dominic Salvatore seeking revenge and found something infinitely more valuable. She had found safety without surrender, protection without imprisonment, and love that didn't ask her to be anything less than exactly who she was. They drove home together, Vivian's hand in his, the ring catching light from passing street lamps. Sophia was waiting when they arrived, already informed by the guards who had been present at the event. She squealed and hugged them both, demanding to see the ring and immediately planning a celebration dinner. Later, alone in the bedroom they shared, Dominic carefully removed his jacket from Vivian's shoulders and hung it beside her gold dress in the closet. 2 pieces of clothing from 2 different moments, the beginning and the continuation of their story. "I love you," Vivian said, watching him in the mirror. "I know," Dominic replied, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "You wouldn't have agreed to marry someone you didn't love. You're too smart for that. Arrogant," Vivian teased. "Accurate," Dominic corrected. She turned in his arms and kissed him, sealing the promise they had made under streetlights and witnesses. Tomorrow there would be architectural plans to review and security briefings to endure, and wedding details to negotiate. But tonight, wrapped in each other and the certainty of choices made with open eyes and willing hearts, they simply existed in the perfect imperfection of their hard-won peace.